Recovery Elevator episode 580.
I got plenty of living to do. I need to do this. I need to do this because it's the absolute right thing to do.
Welcome to the Recovery Elevator podcast. My name is Paul Churchill, and this is how we quit. On today's episode, we have Harvey. He's 71 years old from Fort Myers, Florida, and he took his last drink of alcohol on January 18th, 2026. Great job, Harvey. When you're experiencing negative self-talk, lift your chin up about 1 inch, and you'll find it shifts the whole dialogue. Most likely during campaigns of negative self-talk, it's accompanied with a posture, and usually the gaze is towards the floor. By raising the chin just a little bit, it throws the self-shit-talking mechanism out of whack. Go ahead and try it. Okay, so a big one here is you first have to become aware that you're speaking poorly to yourself. In fact, that's the biggest step forward in addressing negative self-talk. And then lift your gaze, your chin will follow. Take a conscious breath and start again. In 2 days, this Wednesday, April 1st, registration opens for our annual Recovery Elevator Retreat in Bozeman, Montana, which takes place August 12th to the 16th. You can camp under the stars or sleep in a comfortable cabin. It's up to you. This retreat is all about fun, laughter, smiles, and silent disco. Guys, I didn't quit drinking to not have fun. Musical guest Uprise will be back, and it's going to be another awesome year. Link is in the show notes. Thank you, Robin. Did you all know that Robin has been doing the volunteer position of show notes for over 4 years? Robin is one of the coolest people I've met while doing Recovery Elevator. And an update from her interview in 559, this is 21 episodes ago, she did get a passport and she traveled to Costa Rica this past February. In a life without alcohol, doors open and world travel becomes a possibility. Now let's hear from Cafe RE.
Have you realized that alcohol is taking way more than it's giving? Your mornings, your money, your memories, your mental clarity and focus, and that list could keep going. Are you no longer drinking to feel good, but just to feel normal? Or worse, to not feel like death? Here's the good news. You don't have to ditch the booze alone, because after all, the opposite of addiction is connection. Cafe RE has been helping people quit drinking for over 10 years through the power of community. For only a fraction of what it would cost you to deal with liver disease, you get access to over 25 weekly meetings, in-house AA meetings, recovery dharma, open mics, movie club, relationship chats, men's meetings, women's meetings, LGBTQ chats, and more. Yes, we meet online, but we also get our connection on in person. You'll meet people in person at our annual service project or at meetups worldwide. We've had meetups in almost a dozen countries. At Cafe RE, we embrace all pathways into recovery. The only rule, don't do this alone. Oh yeah, and we've got our own app, so you don't have to deal with social media. Go to www.cafe-re.org and enter the promo code CONNECT for your first month free. Again, that's cafe-re.org and use the code CONNECT for your first month free.
Okay, let's get started. I don't know all of you, of course, but I'm going to make a statement or a generalization that I think holds true. We are a sensitive lot. Y'all feel things in a big way, which is a total superpower because it's the sensitive people who are the ones who change the trajectory of humanity with their art, their music, paintings, literature, and ideas that are outside the box. So I'm going to read an excerpt from Shannon Alder about sensitive people, and I want you to see if this rings true for you. Sensitive people are the most genuine and honest people you will ever meet. There is nothing they won't tell you about themselves if they trust your kindness. However, the moment you betray them, reject them, or devalue them, they will end the friendship. They live with guilt and constant pain over unresolved situations and misunderstandings. They are tortured souls that are not able to live with hatred or being hated. This type of person needs the most love anyone can give them because their soul has been constantly bruised by others. However, despite the tragedy of what they have to go through in life, they remain the most compassionate people worth knowing and the ones that often become activists for the broken-hearted, forgotten, and the misunderstood. They are angels with broken wings that only fly when loved. Shannon Alder. I had to read that one twice and was like, yep, that's me in a nutshell. If you want to read that again, it's in the show notes. Thank you, World Traveler Robin. There's a line that I want to read again, and that's, they live with guilt and constant pain over unresolved situations and misunderstandings. Through recovery work, I feel I have forgiven all, including myself. Now, I've still got 99 problems, but resentments, I think I'm good there. But I still remember every single hurt, every wrongdoing, every insult, every cut down, every jab, and I can't get rid of it, and that's okay. I have forgiven, but I don't forget. I'm not supposed to. It's the pangs of these life experiences that I have alchemized for a better life. Would you consider yourself a sensitive person? Again, this isn't a bad thing at all because you feel. There are millions, if not billions, of numbed souls out there, but it's the sensitive people who refuse to sleepwalk through life. And then you've got the sober, sensitive person who wakes up fully, finally, for real. And look out, it's the sober, sensitive person through their healing that heals all. That's the work we're doing here. Thank you so much for listening and walking this path alongside us. Next week in episode 581, I'm going to share with you the best way to feel better, hands down. I hope you all enjoyed this intro. And now I want to mention this is an ad from BetterHelp. In March, we've got International Women's Day. It's a moment to celebrate women's strength and progress while also recognizing how much they carry every day. I know in our own household, my wife does so much heavy lifting, especially now that we have a child that seems to run around the house and just make messes everywhere. So listeners, I want you to take a moment and pause and reflect on the roles that women play in your lives, and also think about the expectations placed on them and the pressures that they feel. Women, you all deserve major kudos and support. With over 30,000 therapists, BetterHelp is the world's largest online therapy platform, and they've got an average rating of 4.9 stars out of 5, and there's 1.7 million client reviews. Women, your emotional well-being matters. Find support and feel lighter in therapy. Sign up and get 10% off BetterHelp.com/elevator. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/elevator. Harvey, how are you?
I'm doing great, Paul. How you doing today?
I'm doing good, Harvey. Thanks for asking. Let's get right into this. When was your last drink, Harvey?
My last drink was January 18th, 2026.
Yes. And at the time of this recording, you are 60 days or 2 months away from your last drink. I'm pumped for you, man. How do you feel, Harvey?
I feel good, feel as strong as I've ever felt as far as sobriety goes.
Right on. Well, Harvey, let's get some information about you before we get into your story. Give listeners some background about yourself. This is your age, where you're from, what you do for a living, what does your family situation look like, and what do you like to do for fun?
All righty. Well, I'm originally from a small town called Brooklyn, New York. I've lived in a bunch of places since then, including Houston, Los Angeles, and Baltimore. Primarily live now in Virginia Beach with my wife, Heather. We also have a house here in Fort Myers, Florida, which we inherited last year. I met Heather in 1980, and we've been married for over 40 years. I've spent my entire life in audio, mostly in terrestrial radio. Was on the air for many years and in production, and then following the old Peter principle, where you rise to your level of incompetence. They made me a manager back about 30 years ago. I've got 2 adult kids. I'm semi-retired now. I work part-time for CNN Audio. And a week from today, I will celebrate my 71st birthday.
Yeah, well, happy early birthday, Harvey. And I'm pumped to have you on the podcast. Listeners, I reached out to Harvey last summer, maybe 6-7 months ago, saying, yo, let's get on the podcast. At that time, you said you wanted to wait till you have a little bit more time away from alcohol. I said, that doesn't matter. And when I do get that response, 95% of the time, I never hear from those people again. That doesn't mean they don't hit their sobriety mark or goal, but here we are. And you reached out to me a couple of weeks ago and said, I'm ready, let's do it. So I'm pumped to have you. Harvey, you bring a lightheartedness to our community cafe RE, to my sobriety. Listeners, Harvey was one of 3 teachers who taught the last edition of our ukulele course. That was freaking awesome. And Harvey was also learning the ukulele as we went. So you're incredibly talented with audio, with music. Thank you for hosting our open mic chat within Cafe RE. I know it's been fun to share the stage with you and listen to you rock it on the piano and on the ukulele. You have really embodied our internal rule here of Rule 22 in Recovery Elevator, which is don't take yourself too seriously. And sometimes when I observe you, I'm taking notes. I'm like, man, this guy is further along the journey as me, and he seems to wear life like a loose-fitting garment most of the times. Maybe I'm wrong with that. But yeah, thank you for being part of my sobriety, Harvey. I'm excited to learn more about you and share your story with the audience. How are you feeling about the interview?
Oh, feel great. As you know, I'm no stranger behind the microphone. Spent my entire career with that. It's one of those things, actually, that I've always loved to do, and I haven't needed to be drunk to enjoy it, unlike so many other activities where a buzz was certainly part of the experience.
Yeah, in terms of audio quality, your interview 580, you're definitely like the top 1, 2, or 3 in terms of audio quality. So all right, I can hear you perfectly. Let's put it that way.
Excellent.
All right, Harvey, I'm going to turn it over to you with your story into and out of an alcohol addiction. I'll let you start wherever you want. I'll jump in with comments and questions. Let's do this, Harvey.
Sounds good, Paul. Well, I guess I will start from childhood. I was a straight kid. For example, I've never smoked a cigarette in my life. I feel grateful for that when I hear people who struggle with nicotine in addition to alcohol. Tobacco has actually only touched my lips twice. Once when I was really young, and apparently it was de rigueur back then if the kid was showing interest in cigarettes to put it to their lips and burn their lips. I'm not sure that's a great strategy, but I think it worked for me because the only other time that tobacco touched my lips was many years later when I was walking in LA with a bunch of radio and record people, and someone passed me a joint and I smoked it and immediately started coughing like a madman and said, "What the heck is this?" And they said, "It's a spliff." And I said, "A spliff? What's a spliff? It's got tobacco in it." No! I was pissed. So anyway, my parents drank, but not alcoholically, at least not as far as I was concerned. I don't have any real childhood trauma. Biggest challenge was that I was a fat kid, not obese, but I think they called it husky. That was the euphemism back then. But I was teased a lot, left out of activities. That definitely left a mark. Had my first drink when I was 16. It was not one of those aha moments. It was just, that's what kids did. I didn't give it much thought. I grew up in a different era. Drinking age was 18, not 21. There was no Mothers Against Drunk Drivers or anything like that. It was still the era of one more for the road, that sort of thing. Went to college. 1972, I was a freshman, was introduced to weed. That was the preferred drug for my friends. Got high pretty much every day, but it was never really an issue. Just to give you an example about that, 1984, 1985, it stopped working for me. And unlike alcohol, I never gave it a second thought. I didn't need it. Alcohol obviously proved to be a different thing. In college, we drank. And there were the occasional times where I was overserved, ended up sick in one way or the other. But, I was young, foolish. I was able to get up the next day, feel okay, and resume. But it was never a problem back then. Heather and I ended up moving to Los Angeles in 1987, got really into the wine culture. But it wasn't until, and I know the actual year and when it was, 1989, when I first started questioning my drinking. And I know that because I started a digital diary then, and I perused it a couple years later and started to see the entries that I was making that was questioning my drinking, because I would wake up and not feel great. It was mainly the hangovers. I wasn't questioning the way I was dealing with other people or any of that sort of stuff, just the fact that I didn't feel great. So that winter, Heather and I decided to take January off from drinking. And of course, this is well before dry January became a thing. Matter of fact, I've always joked about, I wish I had trademarked the whole dry January thing. And I know exactly, again, when it was, because I remember going to my friend's house to watch the Super Bowl, and he immediately asked us what we wanted to drink. And we said, no, we're not drinking. He goes, you're not juicing? He said drinking was juicing. And I said, no. He was flabbergasted.
Harvey, what was that first, this could be the first dry January in history. What was that first dry January like?
It was no big deal. No big deal. But because we did that more often than not for January's moving forward from then, I always knew that we were going to drink again. It was just, let's take some time off, let our bodies heal, we'll feel better, etc. But there was still no thought about, am I becoming an alcoholic? Am I an alcoholic?
Question, Harvey, if my math is correct, 1989, it's 37 years ago. I think you said you first began to question your drinking.
Yes.
Am I correct? So 37 years ago, you did dry January. Didn't seem to be that big of an issue. Okay. You're doing awesome. Keep going.
I would fast forward at this point to 2011, because that was the first turning point. By then, apparently, I'd started hiding my drinking from my wife. I don't remember the specifics, but obviously she thought we were drinking too much. I obviously didn't concur. So I started hiding my drinking, which continued for way too long a time and created maybe the biggest issue between the two of us was all the lying, which I'll get to. But anyway, I walked downstairs to my studio when we were living in Baltimore and was a little surprised to see 12 to 15 empties, cans and bottles displayed. And I went, this isn't good. So obviously, Heather said later she was working on the other side of this divided basement that we had, and she heard something. And so she unearthed all of these empties that I was hiding, obviously not too well. So at that point, she said, what are you going to do about this? And I didn't object at all. I said, okay, let me go find out what I should do. And I probably Googled, what do you do? And found an addiction counselor about 15 minutes away. Went to see this addiction counselor, showed up there, and he said, did you bring cash? I said, cash? What do you mean cash? He goes, I found that I need cash if I'm going to help people, because addicts, he, in his experience, had stiffed him in the past. So I had to go out back to the bank, get $300 in cash. This is in 2011, by the way, and hand it to this guy.
Harvey, let me back it up real quick. When your wife in 2011, I think you said 15 cans of beer on a table in the basement, was there a part of you that first was like, that's not me? Tried to fabricate a story? Like, those are your beers.
No, there was no way to get out of that one.
Okay.
Believe me, I've come up with all the stories and excuses that you can imagine, but there was no way. I was smart enough to realize there's no way of getting around this one. No.
And that's hilarious about the $300 cash. That seems pretty steep, but dude's learned his lesson. Yeah, I'm not taking checks or money order or payment of goodwill down the road. All right, keep going.
Yeah, so, okay, I spent an hour with this guy. And at the end, he says, you need to go to AA. And I said, okay, and that's it. So that was his advice. I paid $300 cash to have a guy tell me to go to AA.
Did you feel it was worth it?
Well, I did go to AA, so I guess it was worth it in that.
Absolutely, could have been, yeah.
Yeah, and you know what? Just recently in one of the chats, oh no, I know what it was. I was listening to the latest Rich Roll podcast, and he was talking, as I've heard so many times, about people, they don't want to go to AA, they go kicking and screaming, they stay in the background, they arrive late and leave early, etc. I embraced AA from day one. I went there, got my big book, shared the first time. I guess it's part of my bubbly personality. But I had no problem with that. And I went for 14 months straight to AA at that point. They suggest 90 and 90, whatever. I did whatever 14 months is in terms of days. I didn't miss a day. And I got a lot out of it. Eventually, I soured on it. Eventually, I started the steps and realized that I'm not a higher power kind of guy. And some of the cultish aspects of AA started to rub me the wrong way. But it worked. I didn't drink for 14 months and gained a lot of wisdom.
What happened, Harvey, after 14 months?
After 14 months, I decided I needed to do some of your favorite phrase, field research. Obviously, I had not done enough research yet. And in retrospect, no, I hadn't, because it was my first foray into sobriety. And I don't know that I thought at that point that I got this, but I wanted to drink again. And so I did, and continued up until 2024. I'd get a few weeks here. And my whole drinking career, if that's the right word, is the classic slow yet inevitable progression. And when I finally learned, and it wasn't until 2024, and was introduced to the Huberman Lab and some other literature about how alcohol works on our chemistry and our brain and everything, that I realized, oh, I am such a classic case. It's so obvious. I just kept drinking. So I'm sure that I drank for other reasons, but it wasn't, like in other people's backgrounds, trauma or trying to numb things, etc. For me, I just think I just became addicted. I drank for long enough, and it just progressed slowly but surely. I didn't get to that point. I hear people talk about drinking a fifth a day or a handle a day or anything like that. And as a matter of fact, we always talk about moderation, the elusive goal that seems to elude all of us. I could moderate right now, start today, as long as it met my definition of moderation, which would be 4 to 6 drinks a day every day. That's an alcoholic talking. That's not moderation.
If you didn't say that right there, I would have said that as well. According to many outlets, yeah, that definition or the amount of your drinking is alcohol dependency issues. Throughout that, 2012 was after your 14 months until 2024-ish. Did your spouse, your partner, were there any more like, yo, Harvey, here's a bunch of more hidden cans, what's going on? You said there was some lying, some dishonesty there. When did it boil over?
It was gradual, a number of incidents. I was getting to the point where there were more incidents where I wouldn't treat Heather well, where I would be mean to her, as she said. And I think she became more and more attuned to when did I do that? When I was drinking. I treated her much better. And in fact, she would always allude to the fact is you were much nicer when you were sober during that 14-month period. But I didn't want to hear that. And I go, no, I've been fine since then. The whole, I wasn't that bad.
And Harvey, let me ask you a question about the progression.
Yeah.
You mentioned like, this is so classic on the classic tale of the progression into alcoholism. Was that like a light bulb moment that hit suddenly, or did you gradually, as the progression progressed, realize that?
No, it was gradual. And it was really only, again, as I was saying before, after I joined Cafe RE in 2024 that and listened to the Huberman podcast and started to do research that I realized, oh, that's what was going on. No, I was in denial again. I never had a problem saying I was an alcoholic. At the very beginning in AA, I bristled a little because I was comparing myself out versus comparing myself in and finding the similarities, all of that sort of stuff. I still struggle with that a little bit, hearing people's stories and go, I was never like that. But it's not a question of I was never like that, I'm better or something like that. It was, I was never like that. I can only relate to a certain point. Again, the person who drank a handle a day or drank 20 or 30 beers in a single sitting. I think my record was a dozen beers, and that was like once or twice.
Listeners, there's 2 podcasts that Harvey has mentioned. Number 1, the Rich Roll podcast. I love that podcast. Rich Roll is sober. His podcast isn't necessarily in the sober space, but it's definitely part of his podcast. And the other one, you mentioned the Huberman Lab podcast, which is done by a Stanford neuroscientist. And there was one of his episodes titled Alcohol, What It Does to Your Mind, Body, and Health. Maybe something else to that title. But this podcast, and they don't release this information, but Andrew Huberman knew somebody in Silicon Valley or that worked for Apple Podcasts that passed along this information to him. He shared in an interview on one of his podcasts that was the number one podcast on iTunes for almost 2 years. To put that into perspective, there are over 4 million podcasts, which means there are millions and millions and millions and millions of podcast episodes. For one episode to hold the number one spot on iTunes and in Spotify for almost 2 years is a remarkable accomplishment. And I know in big alcohol boardrooms, they're going, oh, fuck, oh, fuck, oh, fuck, oh, fuck. When is this thing going to go? And there's so much money that gets thrown into Congress and the government about lobbying with big alcohol. You know, Andrew Huberman got none of that. Of course, he's only worried about the facts. And the way his personality, his delivery, it's just so perfect. There's no BS. And at the end of that episode, and I encourage everybody to listen to it. I've done a whole podcast episode about that episode. You have no question left in your mind of like, oh, is alcohol good for my cardiovascular health? None. It's poison. It's a class 1 carcinogen. And thank God that paradigm that alcohol is good for you in any capacity is crumbling. It's crumbling and it's being destroyed. And in fact, big alcohol in the last 5 years has lost almost $1 trillion of revenue because A, guys like Huberman are getting the word out, and B, millennials and Gen Xers, they're like, why would I want to poison myself? So big alcohol, sayonara, brother. Your days are limited and they're coming to an end. I don't wish a poor future for anybody, but I think their days are limited. I think it's going to go the way of cigarettes, right? We used to think cigarette smoking was good for you and also made you more elegant. Yeah, thank God those times are done. Harvey, I went a little long there. In terms of with your partner, was that like the tipping point for you with your wife saying like, you were nicer during the 14 months to me? Is your spouse the reason why you quit?
Yes, my spouse is absolutely the reason why I quit. I've often wondered aloud in chats and stuff whether I would be sober if it wasn't for Heather pretty much insisting that I do that. And it's only very recently, as a matter of fact, this year, that I've finally started to embrace the idea that I've heard so many times before that I need to do it for me, first and foremost, that I can't do it for Heather. Not only does that build resentment because she's quote unquote making me do this, but I also lost my train of thought.
While you get your train of thought, I love how you said you have to do this for me because it will build a resentment for the other person. And there was a little bit, I don't want to say self-shaming there. It was like, I've heard it so many times. You and myself and listeners, cut yourself some slack. You've heard it so many times. You can't do this alone, but yet that's how everybody starts. You have to do this with a community, but everybody starts without a community. And so, Harvey, you're right where you need to be. Same with me and you as the listener as well. All right, Harvey, go for it.
I think you alluded to, was that the light bulb moment when my wife said, you used to be nicer? No, I wish that was the case, but I wanted to protect my ability to drink at all costs and continue to delude myself, even to the point where one of the last times that I quit and then I said to Heather, I need to try moderation again. And I told her. She was not happy, of course. And there were definitely, she may not have said out loud, if you do, we're over, but it got very close to that.
When was that conversation to your spouse saying, I need to try moderation again?
Last year.
Okay.
I'll give you the timeline here. 2024, I decided at the beginning of the year, I would like to try and get sober. I probably Googled alternative to AA. And that's how I discovered Recovery Elevator. And I listened to a couple of the podcasts, was intrigued, and then found out about Cafe RE, which was exactly what I was looking for. I was looking for an online sober community that didn't involve 12 steps or religion or that sort of stuff, but came with it, obviously, the community aspect. I didn't know until I joined, and especially your mantra about the opposite of addiction is connection and all that sort of stuff. I didn't know that. At least I didn't know it book-wise, but I knew it intuitively. I knew that, no, I need I need community because, well, I got 14 months again. There's no way to deny that. And what was the difference between when I was at AA and fast forward to 2024 and all those years when I was back and forth? The difference was I didn't have a community. So that's when I discovered Cafe RE. And just as I did with AA, I jumped right in. Again, there was no hesitation. I shared the first meeting I was there. And I don't believe I've missed a day of meetings since I first joined Cafe RE. This is my social life. My community is Cafe RE. I don't believe there's anybody who goes to more meetings than I do, which is also easier for me because I'm semi-retired. So I have more time in my hands. So I look forward to them every day.
Real
So
quick,
back-
Harvey, you mentioned Cafe RE is an online community. A couple months ago, I got an email from somebody else with a photo of you two like kicking it, having coffee or lunch. I forget what it was. You've met up with some of these people in person, right?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's the best part. IRL, I believe, as the kids say these days, right?
Hashtag IRL.
Yeah, those have been great. I've met, I don't know, at least 20, 30 different people who are part of the Cafe RE community, and I'll be meeting more of them coming up next month when we rendezvous at the Grand Canyon, and then hoping to be at the next Costa Rica trip, etc. This is absolutely what I need. I need a sober community, especially now that I don't really have, certainly not a robust social life. Again, I'm about to turn 71 as we're recording this. It's not like it was. Speaking of, I can't believe people getting sober in their 20s or in their 30s. That is unimaginable to me because what did we do? We went out and we partied. That was the lifestyle. And so I so admire the many members of our community who are so much younger. And I don't really focus on regrets or I wish I had done this or hadn't done that. I try not to dwell on that sort of stuff. I don't know that it's helpful and it can make you feel really bad. I can't imagine what would have happened if I had known all this and started on the sobriety journey 40 years ago, as opposed to back in 2011. But I'll never know.
Yeah, everybody quits when they need to. And Harvey, I agree with you. Almost every chat that I join, jump in, host, I'm like, what's up, Harvey? And it's been cool to see you embrace technology. Say there is a chat on a Wednesday. You can change your background on Zoom, which everybody can do, but you do it all the time. It's like a happy Wednesday background. And it's been fun to see you put your flair and flavor into the chats. And funny story about Harvey, not funny, but story about Harvey in a chat. I was hosting it and I brought the topic of higher power as the topic to the chat. And almost everybody who starts their share says, hey, thanks for the topic. I like the topic. And then they go. And Harvey shares, he's like, hey, I don't like the topic. This is a topic for AA. I don't want to hear it again. And I think you muted yourself. And I don't even think you shared. Or maybe you shared, but it was brief. And I was like, all right, that's a first for me. Thank you for sharing. And yeah, the topic was of higher power. We do have in-house AA meetings, but it was not an AA meeting. It was just a normal Cafe RE chat. And I've never had that happen where AA has like, it needs to be an AA topic, which is fine. And I appreciate you speaking up. And it was the 20th century Swiss psychologist Carl Jung who said that a power outside of ourself is almost required or necessary to heal from addiction. Obviously, that's philosophy. That's thinking. But where are you at with the higher power thing? And I'm not like teeing this up to go somewhere. We've had interviewees on the podcast. They're like, don't have one, don't need one, don't care about having one. That's totally fine. And then we've also had the other side. It's like, yeah, I pray to my higher power every day. I do feel we are bioelectrical beings that have electrical currents that are going everywhere into the universe. I felt this, I've seen this in meditations. And I think alcohol is almost like an essence that takes the essence out of our beings. It like extracts our soul and life force that dims our energy, the electrical current, or dims our light. You can see that with our eyes. And call it a higher power, God, maybe it's just energy. Where are you at with this right now? And again, I'm not teeing this up looking for a specific answer. I'm curious, just want to hear it and share it with the audience.
Well, hopefully you know me well enough that even if you were teeing it up for a specific answer, you're not going to get it.
Oh, I know.
However you phrased it, it's not a thing for me. I don't bristle at it. I pointed it out that day only because there were one or two newcomers to Cafe RE who reached out to me in the side chat because the topic was higher power and they were looking like I was for an alternative to AA. So I wanted to assure them, no, this isn't typical. And that's why I mentioned it. That was the only reason, not because I personally said, I don't want to talk about this. My thought is, and I'm an atheist, I have no problem saying that. I don't think there is a God. Do I believe that there are powers greater than me in the universe? Of course. I can't imagine anybody thinks that they're the be all and end all, and they're the most powerful person. That's for sure. I'm not a deep thinker like you. I don't go beyond that. Whether that's a failing or a superpower, it could be a little of both, but I don't dwell on it. So my whole thing with the higher power is no, I don't need to believe and worship or acknowledge a power greater than me to help me do that. I believe it is ultimately me. It's me who's deciding that alcohol no longer serves me and that I shouldn't drink it. That I'm 100% with, is that trying to do this on your own. I'm sure there are people who have been successful, but not a lot. You hear those stories, right? Of, yeah, my dad one day decided he was going to stop drinking and he did. And of course, my first reaction is, well, then he probably wasn't meeting the definition of alcoholic, whatever that may be. The way I look at it is he obviously didn't have that big a problem if he could just stop on a dime and never drink again. Every now and then I'll go to an AA meeting. I don't stay away because of that.
Well, at RE, we do believe there's no right or wrong way to ditch the booze. There's a big asterisk on that one. Just don't do it alone. That's really it. I appreciate the comments. Harvey, in 2011, you went 14 months without alcohol, and we are 2 months away right now. How are we going to get 12 months? How are we going to get to uncharted waters? Another 12 months.
I think the key for me now, as I mentioned earlier, is that I have moved from I need to do this for Heather and to keep my marriage together, keep my family together. And I need to do this for me because I know intellectually that this is not going to end well. I know it. Just because I'm able to, quote, moderate 4 to 6 drinks a day, it's not going to stay there. All I have to do is look at the evidence, the slow, inevitable progression. It's going to become increasingly difficult and it's going to impact my life. Again, I have no concept of mortality right now. Every time I have to go, what? I'm about to turn 71? That's crazy. My dad died at age 70.
Wow.
So, yeah, so it's like, this is nuts. So if for no other reason than the selfish reason is I got plenty of living to do. I need to do this. I need to do this because it's the absolute right thing to do. One of my favorite Cafe RE people is Karen S. from Massachusetts. And we had a long conversation a while back. And then I actually brought her in as kind of my co-host for a Cafe RE chat about the need to embrace sobriety. And I'm getting to the point. There's a bit of faking it till I make it there. But I know that the only way that this is going to continue, as you said, how are you going to continue this, is if I continue this reframing to where I am not looking at this as a punishment. And as a matter of fact, it just came up recently, and Karen had mentioned this before, and Aaron mentioned this about the 5 stages of grief. And I had heard this, but I finally realized, yes, I'm grieving alcohol. And I've been doing that for a long time now. And it's not a linear thing going through the 5 stages of grief, but I'm finally getting to acceptance. And it's been years. I'm fighting each step of the way, but I believe now wholeheartedly that I'm in the acceptance phase, that I'm accepting the fact that, okay, alcohol is no longer part of your life. It's not going to be, still think about it every day, multiple times a day, but it's starting to get a little bit easier with each day.
If the question popped into my consciousness, I know it did with a couple listeners. I want to go back to your moderation plan of what successful moderation looks like of 4 to 6 drinks a day. Are they 4 12-ounce cans of beers? Are they 4 to 6 tall boys? Are they 4 to 6 double rum and cokes?
I morphed from a wine guy to a craft beer guy. I wholeheartedly embraced the craft beer scene. And so, of course, I also discovered that what are the beers I like most? The high power IPAs. So it would be the 7 to 8%, 16-ounce pints of craft beer. And it would be 4 to 6 of those, usually on the 4 side, because those are pretty powerful, obviously. Or it would be a bottle of wine, which is 5 drinks. So there you go. And typically, where it used to be that Heather and I would share a bottle of wine, and it for both of us, it kept going where we'd open the second bottle. We didn't for years. It was like, no, 1 bottle of wine split between 2 people is plenty, 2.5 glasses of wine, 12 point whatever it is. And then the next thing I knew is I had to open that second bottle to get the same buzz, et cetera, et cetera.
Harvey, how has your relationship with your partner, Heather, changed in the last 2 months?
Oh, well, let me tell you about the last field research that I did, because we haven't actually talked about that. So the lying, as I alluded to before, since I joined Cafe RE, I got 8 months when I first joined. So I joined July 2024, 8 months. It wasn't always easy, but it was pretty seamless. I realize now that I started planning my relapse a few weeks before it came in spectacular fashion, by the way. I relapsed at my sister's 65th birthday party in Charlottesville, and no one knew that I was drinking. So I had to get the buzz on, because when I went to the party, obviously, I didn't want to start trying to sneak drinks at her party. So I did all my drinking before the party. I don't know how much I had, but it was so much that the police were involved, because I apparently made a fool of myself. She lives on a golf course, and I was stumbling around the golf course. I've still got an issue with my daughter, because she was there. My son wasn't there, but my daughter was there, and she and her boyfriend took me back home after assuring the police that they would do that. That hasn't been mended yet. That was a year ago in March. And then since then, I got a few months here, not the same 8 months, went back out again. And there was deception, so much deception on my part. Finally, my wife said, "Have you been drinking?" "No." "Are you sure?" "No." "You sure about that?" "No." Instead of just fessing up. And then, of course, there was the day that I said, I felt like, if you've ever seen the old Perry Mason TV show, which would invariably end in the courtroom with Perry Mason, the lawyer, beating down someone on the witness stand until they finally would throw up their hands and says, "Okay, I did it." And that was what it was like with Heather. I said, "Okay, I did drink." And there was one time where I said, and that wasn't the only time. And I drank here, and I drank here.
How did that feel, Harvey?
Somewhat cathartic, but also horrible. As Heather has said to me so often, it's absolutely true, I will do anything to stay out of that situation. I will lie, cheat, steal, whatever, rather than to feel that distinct discomfort of admitting that, yeah, I did. I lied to you again. So this happened on New Year's Eve. I went to see a basketball game, VCU, and met my son and my daughter in Richmond. And I already was planning. I even told Heather, I really shouldn't go because the pressure, I'm going to feel pressure. It's New Year's Eve. Sure enough, I pre-gamed. My kids suspected. And then my son followed me when I went to the concession stand, suspecting that I might try to sneak a beer. And that's exactly what I did. So that really soured things with my kids. This is New Year's Eve, this past New Year's Eve day. Didn't tell my wife. They didn't tell my wife. And then my wife caught me drinking. I think at this point, I just wanted to be found out because I barely even made an attempt to hide this little box of wine that I had. Didn't get drunk or anything on any of these. Someone in a chat said, did something bad happen? I said, no. Nothing bad happened, except I lied. I drank and I lied about it. And then at that point, we were supposed to come down here to Fort Myers together. And she suggested that I go by myself. She was not ready to deal with me. So I drove down here. And then that's brings us up to date. That was January 16th when I drove down here, drank the next couple of days, not crazy, had a couple of beers, knowing that I was going to quit on Monday, which I did. And now Heather and I just came down together. So it's still touch and go right now.
Yeah, that stuff takes time, without a doubt. Harvey, I got one more question before we hit the rapid fire round. I've heard you say in many Cafe RE chats that drinking is like your raison d'etre. I think I know what that means. It's like a hobby. It's what you like to do. You just really enjoy drinking. Now, without drinking, what are you going to do to fill the void? This could be golfing, community, bass fishing, whatever. But yeah, what are you going to do?
The age-old question. Yeah, and that's been a bit of a struggle since I joined Cafe RE. Because, right, what hobbies are you going to take up? Well, the good thing is that you inspired me to take up the ukulele. And so it's right near me, right here. It's always near. Pick it up, keep those calluses going. Just bought a new to me keyboard, a Nord keyboard that cost a ridiculous amount of money. And I'm looking forward to learning that. So music, re-embracing music is going to be primary. I love walking. I mean, my life is going to Cafe RE meetings and walking a ton and playing music. And then we'll see. I try not to put too much pressure on myself there because I'll get anxious and go, well, you got to come up with something else to fill the time. But it's a day-to-day thing.
Harvey, we have reached the rapid fire round. If you could answer these questions within 5 to 10 seconds, that would be great. Are you ready?
I am ready.
All right. What's the one thing you've learned about yourself on this alcohol-free journey, Harvey?
That I don't need a buzz to have fun.
And what's your most memorable sober moment?
Performing for Cafe RE.
And I will plug that. You got to see this guy. It's awesome. What's your favorite alcohol-free drink?
There's a brewery called Self Care, any NA beer from them. They are the gods of NA beer right now.
Harvey, what's the point of life?
There is no point.
All right. What's your favorite, let's go 70s band?
Yeah, I'm glad you went with 70s because no matter what era you were going to ask, the answer was going to be Steely Dan.
Before we jumped on, he called me Pablo Cruz. And I'm like, ooh, what's going on there? You don't know Pablo Cruz? I was born in 1982, Harvey. No, I don't. Next question. What has recovery made possible for you, Harvey?
Keeping my family together. That's first and foremost.
What are your favorite resources?
Cafe RE, Quit Lit, podcasts, the usual suspects.
Harvey, what do you think is chickens as pets?
I cannot picture it.
What parting piece of guidance can you give to someone who's ready to quit?
Don't put it off till next month or to Monday. If you've made the decision that you want to quit, do it immediately. Don't leave yourself any wiggle room.
Harvey, what do you have to say to all of our Cafe RE peeps out there?
At my advanced age, this may be a cliche, but life goes by really fast. The older you get, the faster it travels, never slows down. So try not to settle. Don't let time pass you by.
And Harvey, before we depart, you might need to ditch the booze if line. Let's hear it.
You might need to ditch the booze if you wake up banging along the right guardrail of the New York State Thruway.
Yeah, we're both in the right spot, for sure. Harvey, that was rad. The interview just flew by. Thank you so much for being in Cafe RE, being part of my sobriety and sharing your story. You rocked it.
And thank you, Paul, for establishing Recovery Elevator and Cafe RE. They've become such an integral part of my life.
I recently added to my flock with chickens. My brother asked me, why did you get chickens? And I was like, I'm not really fully sure why I got chickens. And even while walking around Murdoch's, the store that sells chickens, I was like, why are we getting chickens? And even while driving home with a box of chirping chickens, I was like, what am I doing? Now, I had that same feeling when I drove home from the county fairgrounds with my goats, and that ended up being one of the best things ever. So back to why did I get chickens? Well, they give eggs. That's a huge bonus right there. We spend money on eggs, so this should offset some costs. Probably won't break even, still have to buy materials to build a coop, but they are giving back. Another reason is it feels good for me to provide them a healthy environment, to give back, to give them clean water and clean food. Another reason here is I wanted to learn about another species. I don't know anything about birds, parrots, or chickens, or dinosaurs. There's a phrase you've heard in this space and on this podcast, and that's the opposite of addiction is connection. But what are we exactly connecting to? Many people think other human beings, which yes, check mark, that's a big one. And then the self, that's probably the biggest connection we're making. But the aperture of what we're connecting to has expanded infinitely for me in the last 5 years. And connecting with another species has been one of the coolest things I've done in sobriety. Again, I have goats, I have reptiles, I have a dog. I think you guys get the point. We can even connect with the land, the food, the planets and the stars and the ocean. So I got chickens because I want to explore connection. I want to study them. I want to sit and watch them. I want to see what they like, what they don't like, what fears they have. I want to see how my yard responds after a year of chickens. After 1 year of having goats, every single tree in my yard bloomed with beautiful flowers that I had never seen the previous 6 years of living at my house. There's no coincidence that the goats, when they eat the grass, they poop it out, it's manure, fertilizer, that the yard responded in such a healthy manner. I got chickens so I can connect deeper with the earth, with the planet. It's another 10 minutes that I have to spend outside daily. I got chickens so I can improve my carpentry skills, because now I got to build them a house. Currently, the chickens are 6 feet to my right as we speak, as I record this. And when I first put them there, I was like, this is not going to work. They keep chirping, and maybe you can hear them right now. But I quickly arrived at the conclusion that everybody loves the sound of birds or that chirping noise. So if you hear it, it's good for the nervous system. And if you notice birds on a walk or while you're listening to the podcast, that means your nervous system is in a good spot. It's a good thing. So Ari, I'm going to keep you up to date on the chicken journey. And it's one of those things where it's like, if you had told me I was going to get chickens in sobriety when I quit drinking, I would have called you silly. You get the point. But as long as we're open to life, stepping outside of our comfort zone, we're stepping into the infinite. Anything becomes possible. I want to thank our production team. We've got our editor, Natasha, Robin on the show notes, and Chris on the decks putting it together. Recovery elevator. We took the elevator down. We got to take the stairs back up. We can do this. I love you guys.
I see you, Savior, I see you, Savior, Almighty Savior, I see you, Savior, I see you, Savior, I see you, Savior, Almighty Savior, I see you, Savior.